Iraq and a different set of standards for Pakistan, because there the human rights issue was not applied at all. And in fact, it was covered up also. So what is the message to the people of Pakistan? Supposedly the most pivotal ally, their best friend, the key partner in the campaign against terrorism and so forth. So there is a lot of ground to be covered, especially from Washington, D.C.
Right, and now let's go to Washington, and I'd like to ask Ambassador Milam about the $2 billion as well, as Mr. Mushahid Hussain mentioned. That too, I'd like to, the general sentiment over here is that when President Obama was considering sending 30,000 troops in Afghanistan, the budget for that was $30 billion. We have 150,000 soldiers over here. So do you think $2 billion stretched over 4 years is good enough for that?
Right. I mean, this $2 billion that has been announced, I mean, is it significant?
I don't know the answer to that militarily. I would think it is significant symbolically in that it's, we, for a long time after Kerry Lugar was adopted, at least authorized, I think we were planning to sort of walk away from direct military assistance. Now we've walked back towards it. So I think it's yes, significant symbolically. You know, when I mentioned confusion earlier, I think I mentioned or tried to imply that our confusion is about the Pakistani strategy, it's not necessarily Pakistani confusion about their own strategy. And that's one of the problems that we're having a hard time getting over here is, and I'm just telling you that many of my colleagues in the think tank world, as well as in the government, I'm sure, are convinced that Pakistan is playing a double game in terms of the North Waziristan. And I myself can see all the reasons why they might be playing such a game, because, you know, are we getting out of Afghanistan on July 11th or sometime thereafter? I'm sure we'd like to.
Right.
How fast it will go, and I don't think any of that is settled yet. In fact, I think it's going to go very slowly. But I think the Pakistanis are worried about their role in Afghanistan, and they have legitimate interests there.
Right.
So that's the kind of confusion I was talking about.
Right. We'll get back to that point right after the break. We have to go for a commercial break right now, but when we get back, we'll pick up right where we left off here on the platform.
Welcome back. You're with us on the platform, and my guest Mushahid Hussain has been very patiently waiting. He wants to answer Ambassador Milam's questions about the confusion. Mushahid, over to you. And
apart from the confusion, I think, which has been confounded by the reference which he made, Ambassador Milam made, to what is known as, talked about as the double game, and also the figures about the aid. Let me just get the facts right, you know. We are supposed to get $2 billion in military assistance for a 5-year period beginning to end 2012 to 2016, which comes to about $400 million per year. The US is spending $4 billion a week on the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. So let's get the perspective right. Secondly, on this double game business, I also see a strange pattern. I think there's a certain hardening up of rhetoric and policy towards Pakistan at a certain level. When they talk of Pakistan Army units being penalized, then Pakistan is not being included in the dialogue, and then also pressure on North Waziristan at the same time. But there's also a perceptible softening up on Iran, which is of course a good thing. They're including Iran.
Right.
Iran was invited to the talks in Rome last week for the first time, the contact group on Afghanistan and Pakistan. And then Iran, the pipeline thing, they finally dropped their opposition also. And now we have also read that Iran is giving a slush fund to President Karzai, which is all with, I think, under the very nose of the US administration. So that's fine. So on the issue of Pakistan, I think there's a pressure point from either maybe via Iran or via the Taliban. The US wants to put that kind of pressure on Pakistan. And also I feel that there is a political weakness of President Barack Hussain Obama. And somehow Afghanistan is becoming a test case. Apart from the November 2nd elections, you know, he has now decided that he will not go to visit the Golden Temple, the holiest shrine for the Sikh community in Amritsar, because he would have to cover his head, and that might be perceived or presented for an American audience that he is a Muslim or is going to a Muslim shrine. So you can see the kind of fear that is there in the US administration, the vulnerability of the American president and on the Islam factor, and that shows that his options to take decisive action on issues and policies are limited. No wonder they don't talk about Kashmir, and Holbrooke says, I don't want to mention the K word.
Absolutely. Let's go back. Raza, you heard Mr. Mushahid Hussain. Is President Barack Obama, is he worried about his approval ratings with the November 2nd election coming up? And that is the reason that he has this hard stance towards Pakistan. I'd like to ask Ambassador Milam that.
Right. Actually, Maya, before we come back over here, and I'll get to that question to Mr. Milam, but I do want to ask Mr. Mushahid Hussain, a common refrain that comes out of Washington is that we spent about $19 billion on Pakistan since the middle of the 2000s, in 2002. It's a pretty large investment, and the line that we hear a lot here is that any investor wants a return on his investment. So the frustration here is that we spent, that the U.S. administration has spent all this money in Pakistan, both civilian and military, but you know, the results that the U.S. wanted have not yet come forward. I think that's the characterization of the frustration that comes out of D.C.
Let me just clarify that you're talking about $19 billion. 50% of that is assistance. The other 50% is arrears to Pakistan for services rendered. It's money owed to Pakistan. It's not aid. It's not grant.
Right.
It's part of what is termed as the coalition support funds. Because every year, every month, about $100 to $200 million are charged by Pakistan for using our roads, our infrastructure, our airspace, and so forth. So it's not $19 billion as such. It is half of that amount.
And then I'd like to add over here, Mr. Mushahid Hussain, as well, that the expectations that Raza is talking about coming in from the American side, the expectations have been changing. Like, once again, it brings us back to the whole confusion point of view, that we really don't know what the American side wants, because we keep on getting these mixed signals. Like talking to the Taliban is concerned and taking action. Over here, we are told to take action. Over there, it's all about dialogue. So there's a confusion.
Yes, and also I think the bottom line is, a lot of people in Pakistan feel that, quote unquote, the West, which includes the US, NATO, the Europeans, and this grand coalition or whatever, this really does not have the will to win or a stomach for a sustained fight. They're basically looking for an honorable, dignified exit courtesy Pakistan. And it's yesterday once more. They don't want a repeat of Vietnam, but they know that militarily the war is unwinnable. Even Holbrooke has said so the other day in Fareed Zakaria's program on CNN. So basically, it is part of that strategy. It reminds me, it's very interesting. As a student of history, I studied in Washington those days, in the days of the Vietnam War. And Ambassador Milan might correct me. Before they started the negotiations on Vietnam in Paris peace talks in March